Ladies and gentlemen, analysts and associates, welcome to your Managing Director Secretary's favorite podcast, the Big Swinging Decks Podcast by Litquidity and Mark Moran. This is not financial advice. You'd be a bottom bucket analyst to make investment decisions based on what is discussed on this show.
Welcome back to Big Swinging Decks. Lit, how are you today?
Doing fine as always, Mark. Thanks for asking.
Always fine. I just, you're very stable, calm, collected. It's great. It's great. Great boss.
My emotions are like a blue chip stock.
Yeah, I'm more of like a volatile tech stock, I feel like, especially this past week with the sell-off. Just you never know where it's going. Maybe more of the price of cum rocket, I feel like. My moods, they go up, they go down, they swing. But with us today, we have a very, very special interview with Suman Siva, who is the founder of Marco, which is a company that we sent out to our accredited investors. And so, Lit, how many accredited investors do we have from our survey? And what is really kind of the whole intention with this program we're doing?
Yeah, that is a number I will not disclose, Mark.
Okay.
That is something I'm keeping close to the
proprietary.
chest. Proprietary, highly confidential. But we have a very large database of accredited investors who, as anyone who is interested in investing in the markets, want exposure to asset classes that are not just traditional stocks, bonds. They want real estate, they want private equity, they want venture capital. And so
also movies as well. Yes. We also have an opportunity that we sent around recently for a film. But so with the accredited investors, we have a strategy of providing them the opportunity to gain exposure into promising startups that we are excited about, that other VCs are already invested in, and saying, hey, Liquidity is positioned to invest in this. We're already going to invest with you guys or not, but hey, we will give you the opportunity to invest, and we will essentially have a strategy around that. So companies that could use a community on their cap table, they can come through the liquidity vehicle that we prepare for them, and then, just manage it. And then you're able to invest in deals on a deal by deal basis instead of committing to a full fund. Yeah, I think it's interesting because for us, when we're dealing with any potential sponsors or investments, kind of our greatest strength is in terms of generating awareness and then creating conversion on that awareness. And with this community that we have, our shareholders, it's great to be able to bring these deals across to everyone, kind of have this community, investing in something together. And I think the results so far have been pretty tremendous.
Yeah, we have pooled a lot of capital in short periods of time, but we are still, very early. Venture capital is a long-term game, and we'll just have to see how these things, close and then get marked up over time. And hopefully, we've got some unicorns in the stable here. And yeah, I'm excited. And I think Marco is one that I'm particularly excited about because of the community that we can bring together with people who work at top investment banks like Evercore or JP Morgan or Goldman Sachs, to even the top tech firms like SpaceX, Netflix, Google, etc.
Why didn't you mention Nomura?
You know the answer, Mark.
Sorry, I couldn't help myself.
Having this wide array of people that can then go in and be an investor through his vehicle into Marco experiences just makes a lot of sense. And we'll get into what they do, but just in short, Marco is a company that is changing the game in culture and the way that companies can book events for their employees. So it's hey, if you have employees of firms that are investors in Marco, they're kind of incentivized to say, hey, why don't we try out this platform? And it's not them shilling by any means. It's this is a legit platform that once we explain it through our interview with Suman, you'll find out, and it's just going to be a pretty cool dynamic.
Yeah, and I think it's topical as well, coming off of our mental health dialogue with the workplace changing, all the different dynamics with people working from home, being more removed from their coworkers and colleagues. So, I mean, for me, first off, like I just like the name of the company. This was my name in Spanish class in high school, and was very impressed with Suman. So, without further ado, let's get into this interview.
Let's do it.
With us today, we have Suman Siva. Welcome to Big Swinging Decks, my friend. How are you?
I'm excellent. Pleasure to be a guest here. As I mentioned, I'm working out of Costa Rica, Santa Teresa, and no complaints on my end.
What are you doing down in Costa Rica?
Well, I'm working, and we can talk about how Marco, the company that I'm working on, is kind of enabling distributed work, but also I could say a work excuse is checking out some company retreat centers here, so there's a business reason.
Amazing. So you set us up perfectly for that. You are the CEO and co-founder of Marco. And it's interesting because a few weeks ago, we did a mental health podcast, kind of talking about how COVID has really changed the modern day working environments for everyone, something that will we ever go back to a pre-COVID normal in the workplace? And we're here with you to find out about that. But first, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, where you grew up, and then what led to this moment for you guys to really strategically change the workplace as we know it?
Totally happy to dig in. And so we were just chatting before this. As you know, we share a mutual friend from Charlotte, and so that's kind of where I was born.
Shout out to Peter.
Shout out to Peter. And so went to Nashville, to Vanderbilt, for school, and really my career has been pretty traditional. And so I'm an avid follower of liquidity, and so really that's because a lot of what you guys talk about resonates for me. I actually started off my career interning at Citi in investment banking. So that was my first kind of professional experience. I would say investment banking was not for me, so I ended up going to the sister of consulting. But my twin brother, who also went to Vanderbilt, actually he's works at a hedge fund, right? So he did investment banking, private equity, hedge fund, another hedge fund. So very much understand the demographic that you go after, but also I think that demographic has expanded. Right. So it's not just investment bankers. It's actually people in all kinds of different jobs. And so I worked at Bain, working in, traditional consulting, and then had my first taste of entrepreneurship working as chief of staff of a startup in San Francisco. So did that for a bit and then ended up working in investing for a few years. So worked at a growth equity fund out of Boston. And then basically the SoftBank Vision Fund was kicking off. And so
we love SoftBank here. Yeah.
huge proponents of SoftBank. We love it.
Yeah. I get a lot of shit from my brother, who always sends me the decks from SoftBank, which is, if you've seen them, are generally these kind of caricatures of unicorns growing on slides and that kind of thing. I assure you that internally we had a lot more robust decks. So we can talk about.
We'll get into that. We'll get into that.
Yeah. And so worked at SoftBank on the consumer tech team. And really, so to that point had a pretty traditional career path. And so that was the moment where kind of we started Marco actually October of 2019. And so I left working at SoftBank, I guess at this point, 2 years and change ago. And we can talk about the evolution of Marco, but there have been a number of pivots to get to where we kind of focus now, which is helping companies and communities build culture through experiences. So you can think about us as Masterclass meets Airbnb experiences for companies, but also you can think about us as, what Gusto does to solve payroll. We kind of are building product and software to improve the employee experience.
Okay. And so before we continue, just as a little bit of a disclaimer, and one of the ways we know you is that a few weeks ago to our accredited investors, we sent out the opportunity to invest in you and in your company via SPV. So that's something for anyone who's an accredited investor out there who didn't get that. Definitely sign up on the website, but wanted to throw that out there so everyone is aware of what's going on.
Yeah, and if you're not accredited, cover your ears for all the things that we're about to talk about.
This is the official podcast of accredited investors.
Yeah, well, I'm very excited about that. I would say one thing is it really goes to show the community you're building. And so the reason we approach y'all about, partnering and kind of raising some money is really because a lot of what you talk about, even though it's very much super funny and the memes are, hilarious, is a lot about how do you show up to work, mental health, kind of how do you improve the employee experience, whether it's anything from compensation to culture. And there's a lot of very legitimate people that are listening to your podcast. I mean, the folks that have signed up, or I was just looking at the folks that have signed up to invest in everything from Warbird to Evercore to tech companies that like SpaceX and DocuSign. So you have a lot of people on the platform that are listening and, really learning and getting kind of access to information through you guys. So we want to get advocates for Marco at all these companies. So we figure why not work with y'all to make that happen.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So you guys like to brand yourself as the future HQ, right? That you're working with 300 plus companies. Tell us a little bit about the problem you're solving and everything that's going on behind the growth at Marco over the past 2 years.
Totally. Yeah. So the problem we're solving is that I think over the past 2 years, the way we work and live has fundamentally changed. So we used to go into the office every day. When I was at SoftBank, made the painful commute down from San Francisco to South Bay, hour and a half to sit in an office, oftentimes with my headphones on, really just working kind of by myself. And so that was the norm. Now we have COVID, which de-emphasizes the need for an office. So culture is comprised of a bunch of different things. It's the people, the mission and vision, the values, but a big part of culture used to be the place, the office. And so I'm not saying the office is going away, but certainly being de-emphasized, and flexibility will be more of the norm. So then now you have this question around, well, how do you actually build a cohesive culture? I mean, you were an analyst in the trenches. Part of the reason a lot of people stick around is they get to know their fellow analysts, and you're kind of going through this shit with other people, and you build a network, and that network actually pays off, in the long term. So the really, we do experiences, events for companies, high quality, virtually, in person, company retreats. But the fundamental problem we're solving is how do you actually bring communities together through experiences? And that could be for anything that's fun, a happy hour replacement, a holiday party, or something that's more serious, a D&I, diversity and inclusion training, or learning and development, and that type of thing as well.
Yeah, I took it upon myself when I was an analyst to be, quote unquote, like the chief culture officer for the team, where I love to go out and actually bond with my fellow analysts and associates, and maybe some VPs who are still down to earth. But it was just like, yeah, it's very important. And I think like without being able to work in the office, it's just hard for people to actually foster a relationship and loyalty. And, people are just going to quit, burn out. And it's like, okay, what am I doing for a living? Which honestly was part of the reason I also ended up leaving to start Litquidity. I mean, I was already on the way out, but then this kind of accelerated it. So for everyone else then who is going through it right now and just starting out, like, yeah, what do you see as the importance of fostering good culture?
Yeah. So I started off my career at Bain, and the reality is I didn't really love being a consultant, but I actually really did love the people that I met at Bain. And so Bain is, always on Glassdoor, top places to work, that type of thing. And really, I mean, they attract, I think, high quality people. I don't know how I stuck in, but a lot of that is because of the culture, viewed as the cool one of the big three consulting firms. But actually, once you work there, you realize that they're super methodical about how they approach culture. Whenever you're an analyst, you have something called associate consultant training. You all go to Cape Cod, right? There's also everything from budget for case teams. So every month, the analysts are encouraged to plan experiences, events for their team, and you're really encouraged as a partner even to attend all of those, or holiday parties, offsites, trainings. They have a whole bunch of knowledge as to how to do this.
You got none of that in investment banking. So,
well, I would actually disagree. A tale of two stories at Lazard. I had to pay for my group's Christmas party out of pocket and get reimbursed, and that was miserable. And then at Centerview, we would have these retreats in the summer that we'd go to, and just like, it was a wild time. I'll tell a story about blacking out at the Centerview Christmas party one year at another day. But I think that's a great point, Lit, because one of the questions I was going to ask is, so culture at a place like Bain or a Centerview, where you can kind of, it's a relatively smaller organization, is an easier thing to develop when you're having these offsites in Cape Cod, wherever, retreat. But at, say, a larger bank like a Citi, that's a tougher thing to instill, right? Like, you're doing virtual happy hours and shit, and it's miserable, and you're just kind of forcing people to participate. But like, what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, my thoughts are, well, there's a few things. One is, it's really not easy, even if you're at Bain, to do this stuff. So you just mentioned, even though you're working at a really well-funded investment bank, you're having as an analyst to front cash. The reality is, even before COVID, I think Marco as a company really had a place, because typically it could be anyone from an office manager to an EA to the people team to an analyst who has to plan this stuff. And there's not a really good way to plan it. What are you doing? You're going on, Google and figuring out what to do, or you're going to the local bar. So ignore COVID. This actually, to me, if I'm a Bain analyst and I'm like, well, I have a bunch of work to do, and now I'm encouraged to plan this stuff, if there's a platform that enables me to do that, that's great. By the way, we talk a lot about at Marco being intentional around experiences. So, for example, February is Black History Month. We have a bunch of amazing hosts and creators that we've found that are Black History Month focused, but also really interesting, fun, cool. Some of them have been featured on The Atlantic. There's, meditations that also combine culture and heritage. There's a lot of really cool experiences. And part of it is the dual purpose of, hey, we're making it easier to find these things, and they're high quality. And from the creator perspective, we're allowing them to monetize. They don't know the analysts at Lazard, right? How are they going to get in touch with you? It's going to be really challenging. So just ignoring COVID, that's a thing. I think that we're basically, with a big company, or take for Bain, for example, they have so much industrial knowledge on how to do this. We want to make it easy for any company to do. If you're a company that says, I want to invest in culture, you should be able to do it super easily. And for all the finance folks listening, the math works out, right? So McKinsey just published a report around the Great Resignation, which talks about how 18 million people plus have left their jobs since March. I think November was the largest number at 4.5 million people. And one of the biggest reasons is not having a sense of belonging, as opposed to just purely compensation, which is, as you see on liquidity, you're talking about all these banks that are increasing compensation. You're like, well, imagine if you just spent a few $100,000 to improve the employee experience. And there's other ways you can do that, obviously. It's not just through events and experiences, but that is one component that you absolutely should be investing in. And if it increases retention, think about there's statistics that say the payoff is 2x of a highly skilled employee of kind of losing someone. So the math just foots to invest in this stuff.
Yeah, and that goes back to what we said in the prior episode on mental health, is you can do whatever on raising the comp, and it's going to be cool for like the week, and then that kind of like sticker shock, if it's like very cool and a big pay raise, it's going to wear off when you're then back to doing the same shit the entire year. And so I think focusing on culture and longer term things that just like, improve mental health or even physical health will pay dividends, and not just using dividends for, our shareholders. I do think that there is a stronger ROI, okay? It's for whoever's listening here, potentially planning the summer parties for their groups, like spend whatever it is, to host an event that's really sick. And I think like that stretches upon, the entire group versus, hey, like we're going to pay you 100,000, 200,000 more. I mean, ideally there's both, but
ideally there's both, right?
Yeah.
So question going off of that for both of you. So leadership's obviously a top-down thing, right? And that creates culture. So at Centerview for the retreat we had, it would be 2 days, and it would, it's mandatory, right? All work has to take a second tier priority to anything that's going on in terms of all kind of the culture building experiences, all that stuff. And that was, by the two guys who founded the firm, the principle that they set. So everyone had to follow it. But at a larger organization with more people, especially, for bankers, like they're not taught how to manage people ever. Like we've always said that they're some of the worst managers on the planet, especially VPs. This is an anti-VP podcast. I just decided that right now, but the war on VPs. But so how do you kind of emphasize this? To assuming the decision makers for spending a few $100,000 are higher up people, maybe they don't understand the importance of culture. Is just showing kind of the financial returns, the ROI, if you will, on it, is that enough? Or what have you seen in your experience on how to sell this to people making the decisions ultimately at firms?
Totally. I think there's a few ways to do it. One is to make it so easy that it doesn't make sense to not do it. So we're building product that enables, our big push for Marco now is we've built a marketplace that enables you to book all these amazing experiences, find these creators. Our big focus now is Marco memberships, which is our kind of enterprise company level or team level offering where you'll have a dashboard, you'll have suggestions. It basically makes it so easy for you to figure out what you should be doing and plan this kind of culture calendar that as opposed to it being a pain for you and cumbersome, it's super easy. So that's one way. The second way is our supply philosophy. Even though we're selling to companies, ultimately companies are comprised of consumers. So especially at some of these, more tech companies, finance firms, the expectations are quite high. So I think there's this philosophy of what you mentioned, hey, I have to do this pain in ass event, as opposed to, oh my gosh, this is a perk. I get to do this and learn something new or experience some really interesting, new restaurant concept that I hadn't. Right? If you're doing a private dinner at Carbone, you're not going to be saying, oh no, this sucks, I have to do this. You're going to be excited.
Yeah.
So there's an element of just bringing the quality. And there's an education component. And I actually think there's been a lot of normalization of talking about, how employees are doing and connectivity. And I do think, we can talk about how I think the world looks, which is really informed by all the smart people we talk to. And I think that the benefits of flexibility that we've had over the past 2 years have also come with a loss of, no one really wants to not see their employees ever, right? And just work in their kitchen. So I think there actually is a desire broadly on how do we build and engage employee base, but people just don't really know how to do it. So it's, I think, a new concept of, if we have flexible working, well, how do we actually build this cohesive culture, right?
For sure.
So one question that I just thought of while you were talking about building a cohesive culture, for me is kind of like stereotypical white male who worked in finance, right? I would always view bonding and kind of getting to know your colleagues through various drinking events, right? I just thought that was the most organic way to do things. And so I'm wondering, if you're doing, say, not a dinner at Carbone or something that's really going to be much more kind of inclusive to everyone, because like finance is obviously a very male-dominated industry,
Totally.
and perhaps like a drinking event, for a 22 to 24-year-old female analyst isn't something, that they're going to want to just get rowdy with the boys at, right? And so that could kind of exclude them from some opportunities, but let alone people who don't drink. What are kind of some other ways, just for our shareholders, who are listening to this in their own work environments, to kind of think about how to create these networking events in ways that are inclusive for everyone?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that oftentimes people just do what's easy. So the reason you go to a bar is because that's kind of the easiest thing. By the way, you could also go to an amazing sake bar and learn about a new beverage type or a food spot that has an alcoholic option.
If I go to a sake place, I'm getting bombed no matter what.
Blacking out.
Yeah. Dude, so Austin Power is at Accidental Bar. He's one of our hosts. You got to check him out. He's amazing. But it's not just focused
Austin Powers?
Austin Power. So
singular.
Yeah, baby.
Yeah, baby. Yeah.
But he has this incredible sake tasting experience where you're actually walking out charmed because he's a charming guy, as well as drinking a bunch of sake and doing a shambong. But then what we also focus on is actually figuring out expanding the aperture a bit. So I actually
what does aperture mean?
Yeah, expanding let's say expanding the option set that you're evaluating.
Our shareholders know, they're very sophisticated.
They're super sophisticated. So one of the things that we are focusing on is some of these diversity, inclusion, and kind of learning and development experiences. And so for Black History Month, there's a lot of really cool ones that are more casual, like Brooklyn Tea, which is a Black-owned tea company in New York, or kind of around music. And there's kind of meditations that I mentioned that are led by kind of hosts that actually focus on wellness and how that integrates with race relations. So there's a variety, but also you think about your demographic right here on the show. We're also going to have a lot of learning and development. So think about Web3, right? If we partnered with someone who really understood what Web3 was, and we're working with a few folks to put this together, and we had a class around that, who wouldn't want to take that? You'd be like, holy crap, now I'm learning something new and I don't have to sound like an idiot in front of my crypto degen friend.
Yeah. So as Mark asked what Aperture was, can you define what Web3 is? That's just a trick question. Everyone has a different definition of it.
Did you see that video of like what it's like drinking in the metaverse with the guy throwing the beer bottle and then a fight starting? That's just what I imagine this to be like.
Yeah, it's interesting. So we can talk about Web3. I know that y'all are, which is funny because this is a finance. What is Web3? So decentralized web.
Nice.
Web2 was centralized. So a lot of companies being built, such as Facebook, which kind of own user data and are centralized applications. Obviously, there's a lot of hot takes as to, is Web3 going to replace Web2? I'm probably middle of the road. I think there's some interesting applications, whether it's crypto or DeFi as it relates to finance, or really what we're interested in is how Web3 affects culture. So we are passionate about culture. So me personally, whether it's music or art or a number of things through NFTs, how does that evolve? I think personally, I'm really interested in seeing use cases, a few things. So Web3 communities, I think will have IRL gatherings. So one of the things you see this at Art Basel and you see this at NFT NYC. So we're talking to some Web3 communities around, hey, you got a 10-person team and you got millions of dollars in the bank through these NFTs. You need to differentiate by providing value to your community members. You can do that through, you see the Adidas drop with Bored Ape Yacht Club, as well as Pixel Vault. That's a physical good. They're also talking about how do we have programming? So we can very much help them through Marco. How do you provide value to your community members? But on the creator side, it's super interesting, right? Like what if Kith, the clothing company, plus a really cool artist did a drop specifically for Centerview? That would be really cool. And then you could kind of take that digital asset for you and we can organize that through Marco.
Yeah.
That's some of the things we think about for the medium to long term, but certainly we care about this stuff because we care about culture.
Well, instead of Kith, what if Litquidity does that and we put a fucking epic in real life event for the followers?
Well, I'm sold.
What about multiple this summer in the Hamptons? Would you attend?
I would very much attend. And also we would, that's the thing, because you have to then, what you're doing is building an audience. What if we could say, hey, we'll take care of the experiences. You can use us to really engage your audience. We've already talked about for all the folks from the liquidity community that are participating in this kind of strategic fundraise here. We're going to do engaging events with them, and that's going to be amazing. They'll all meet each other.
I want to go back to something you mentioned when you were touching upon like Black History Month and just different types of events that you're hosting. And I thought that was very powerful in the sense that, as you were mentioning before, like how analysts or EAs or whoever tend to just like rely on like what they find interesting in planning events, and that just leads to perpetuating whatever culture that there is or ignoring the same types of folks that are underrepresented. I think like if there's a way to sort of say, hey, like I really don't know how to cater to these people, you guys can actually step in with your platform, with your curated events, and offer these things that it's essentially like, hey, pick the cultural type of event that you're trying to host, and you have that there. Versus, I wouldn't trust a first-year analyst who grew up in Greenwich and lives in Murray Hill and likes to just black out at the Gem Saloon on the weekends to plan something that's very inclusive to a diverse team. So
Yeah, my view is I actually do think that people fundamentally want to be inclusive and expand their horizons. I
Mhm.
think that perhaps when you're younger and you're, first year, second year analyst, you might be just expanding your horizons. But I think being more accepting is actually cool now. I went to
Mhm.
Vanderbilt. When I first got there, it was certainly not a place that felt diverse or accepting. By the way, by the time I was a senior, it was
Mhm.
much more accepting, and it wasn't
Interesting.
actually cool anymore to have this kind of mean girls mentality. So I do think people want to do this stuff, especially if it's interesting. We do the
Yeah.
experiences that are on our platform, and I think
Mhm.
you typically will walk away and say, "Oh, I didn't realize that I would have just normally gone to the local bar, but this was way more interesting. If I'm going to spend money on something, why not make it impactful and meaningful?"
I like that.
Yeah.
By the way, we do plenty of fun stuff too, right? So that's the beauty of it.
So if you do want to get bombed with your group, blacking out, it's not something you outwardly advertise, but you do have the fun stuff too.
Yeah. We don't take responsibility for the folks that are over imbibing in their analyst crew. That's on them. But
One of the funny things I was just thinking of is the worst team building event I've ever gone to was after my associate training at Lazard. We had to do an escape room, and I was bored, so I just walked out the door, and they're like, "You can't do that." It's like, it's an escape room. I literally just escaped. Those are so stupid. I don't know how it's a business.
well, it sounds like Mark, you were bad at escape rooms, is what
Well,
it
clearly
sounds
I
like.
was good. I just walked out the door.
Yeah, the ultimate escape. Fair enough. Fair enough.
So I guess just to wrap up stuff on the Marco side of things, because I do want to get into the SoftBank stories that we were so
Oh yeah.
promised earlier on. So where do you see this going then? I know we already mentioned that we're in the middle of raising some capital to help you guys in helping this grow, and hopefully some of the individuals that are there can then find a reason to say, hey, we should try out Marco internally at our firm. But where do you see Marco in say the next few years?
Totally. Yeah, I'm really excited. I think that the past few years have been kind of crazy. We started this pre-pandemic. We pivoted into, focusing on virtual experiences and then focusing on companies B2B. We've now expanded that. So we're multiple product categories and still focus on companies, but also various types of communities. But really the problem we're solving, I think, has been clarified as to people. So for our own team, we're in New York, San Francisco, LA, Seattle, Miami, Atlanta, and the Philippines. And we're under
Hmm.
20 people. You can't go back from that. You can't just say, hey, everyone, come back to one city. And what you're finding, especially in tech companies, is instead of having to get everyone within a 7-mile radius, you can recruit anywhere. So there's a lot of Twitter threads from folks like Brian Armstrong, CEO of Coinbase,
Yeah.
from various tech folks who are saying, hey, the CEO of Brex had a post about this, which was, now we're recruiting everywhere. And there will be, you're seeing this in all the customers we talk to, is a lot of people don't really know how to build this culture. Because I think there's actually a big opportunity in, after the pandemic kind of subsides, hopefully Omicron chills out, and now we're in this world where we're like, okay, we have more flexibility, but we still want the upside of potentially, having those, that analyst bonding opportunity or whatever it is. So I think
Hmm.
even finance firms probably will be a little bit more flexible, but especially more broadly in companies, we have everyone from Home Depot to Dropbox using us, and they're going to say, how do we approach this? And I think there will be a need for a company like us. And so the thing we're most excited about is we grew really quickly in terms of the team size, in terms of revenues and that kind of thing over the year. But now I think we're really going to hopefully be this embedded culture partner that goes beyond booking a one-off event, but we're really helping plan a large part of your culture and experience.
Yeah, I love that. And I mean, I would assume that the majority of people that are, or firms that are adopting this earlier on, are tech and consulting type firms that already place an emphasis on this. And I think where I'd probably see more of a push needed is in these investment banks or private equity funds or
Mhm.
whoever that just kind of have all this like red tape, or they like to do things the old fashioned way. And it's a hindrance, but I think if you unlock that, that's going to be epic.
Yeah. If I'm speaking to any of these folks, I would say, hey, you're paying these analysts and VPs in the stratosphere with regards to the comp. Don't you think that for retention, if you also said, oh, by the way, we have badass culture and we found an expert to help us build that, that is a competitive advantage. So if I'm this firm, I would be taking the lead in doing that. And I think it's I know that some of them already do. So I mentioned Insight Partners, a lot of the, especially more kind of venture folks, they value this stuff.
That was always a selling point in recruiting. That was like, well, how do you differentiate yourself from Goldman Sachs or JP Morgan or whatever? And everyone's like, oh, we have a great team culture or something like that. And, it's
and you're
just
like, how? And then you go there and you're like, well, that was not true.
Yeah.
It's like
shit.
I just see balding 30-year-olds on computers hunched over. It's the same everywhere. But I think, though, one of the things I wanted to say that you're touching on is, when you look at kind of a traditional bullpen, and we'll just use banking as an example because that's the majority of our followers, it looks a lot different these days in terms of diversity and also in terms of kind of gender composition, right? And so I feel like we're reaching a point that, is, if we haven't reached it already, we're very close to, in terms of people kind of really starting to change their perceptions of what do we do to make an inclusive workforce? What do we do to make sure that everyone is feeling valuable and like an integral part of the team? And I really see Marco as something that can help do this in a great way, other than just like having a shitty, cocktail hour with your colleagues on Zoom.
Yeah, I mean, the way we talked about it is you spend so much time at work, particularly if you're in finance, that the bigger refresh. By the way, investment banking doesn't fundamentally have to be a bad job. Right? It's actually providing, it's providing the ability for companies to raise capital, to, go public, to acquire, merge with other companies. It is objectively could be interesting, but there's this big connotation around, oh, by the way, but your life has to suck, right? Your work life has to suck. And then maybe you can make some money and then, spend it on the weekends. Whereas I don't think, for me at least, there's just more to life.
Definitely.
Spoken like a true ex-consultant.
A true Vanderbilt alum. I think for a lot of people, they get into it to quote Step Brothers because they want to make bank and drive a Range Rover.
Because I want to make bank, bro. I want to drive a Range Rover.
But then you really start to kind of value your time more and want to create something, especially as you get older, start relationships, have kids, develop something that's sustainable. I think this is great.
Cool. So that is now the perfect segue into asking you what a lot of our shareholders would like to know about is your experience at SoftBank. What kind of tales can you give us without, having people come fly out and find you in Costa Rica in the bunker that you're holding at right now?
Yeah, I didn't have a chance to consult my legal counsel to figure out what all I could share. I've made the joke before that if Marco doesn't work out, then I can always pursue a career in screenwriting to figure out a way to make a Netflix documentary, which isn't going to happen. I would say I actually had a really good experience at SoftBank overall because it was just so interesting. And so one of the things that you see in liquidity is tech is kind of taking over traditional industries. And while this is a finance podcast, perhaps, right, it also touches tech. You guys talk about Web3. You guys talk about all kinds of different trends.
Yep.
I was at traditional consumer growth fund. And even there, I was looking at e-commerce companies. And so my philosophy was, hey, I need to go out to San Francisco, to Silicon Valley, and check this out. And so I think there was a ton of, on the positive side, lots of smart people, tons of exposure. Truly the Wild West. I think all of what you read, a lot of it, it's just out there, right, in terms of the amount of capital, what that led to in terms of deals that were done. And the interesting thing was Masa valuing just extremely bold people, perhaps in some cases overvaluing their boldness. But these people, what I realized, the reason why I left actually, is I found a lot of these entrepreneurs to just be people. And so they were just thinking really boldly. And so I kind of said, what the hell, I can do this. My mom is a classic Tiger Bomb. She in an Indian accent. She used to email me these emails, and she said, "Suman, you're a dreamer. Don't dream." I was like, you know what? Screw it. I'm just going to go try to do this. And I think it's the best time to be an entrepreneur. So I learned a lot about technology. I got access to a lot of really amazing entrepreneurs, and I couldn't have done that without being there. That being said, it was a crazy place.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that perhaps is a learning is investing in culture there is also important, because everything from the culture of the people to how you kind of create a firm from scratch. What they try to do was really ambitious. Typically, a lot of these venture funds have been around for 20 years, 30 years, perhaps.
So just going through the resume, right? You were at a much smaller fund before. What was that conversation when you told them that, hey, by the way, I'm going to be joining SoftBank's $100 billion fund?
It was a bit of a roller coaster. So they were certainly not pleased, because I was in a 2-year program. So they were not pleased. But what are you going to say? When I first joined SoftBank, it was kind of the new kid on the block, and it was certainly kind of hot. And then you had a period where it was not, because there was a lot of turmoil. You have the WeWork news and you have the Khashoggi news. Actually, now I think SoftBank has done some pretty good deals recently, and their brand has kind of improved. And so I actually think they're going to have decent returns on the Vision Fund 1. And what is crazy is they've created a whole new way. They kind of led the path for Tiger and perhaps Coatue and some of these other funds. So I think Tiger is just doing a hell of a job of saying, okay, if I want to invest in tech companies early and late stage as an asset class, I can hire Bain to do a bunch of the diligence. I can deploy an immense amount of capital at a really quick speed. And I think they're going to crush it as well. And they don't have to have the 40-50% IRR on a smaller fund. They can have a more, normal return profile. So I think, like it or not, my view is that SoftBank was a crazy experience personally, and I think really changed the game in certain ways with regards to tech.
So did you ever dap up Masa-san?
I met him once, but he certainly doesn't remember me. But I met a lot of the characters in kind of SoftBank, and super interesting people. I think the crazy part is putting 7 managing partners who never worked together in a situation where they now have an ungodly amount of money to deploy, which is really an interesting social experiment. But yeah, I met Rajiv a number of times, so he's definitely an interesting one as well.
Nice. And were you involved in any of the slides that have become so famous with SoftBank's Vision Fund?
My brother suggests that I was, but I certainly was not.
Last question then is, did you have a hand in minting any of the unicorns? Because I know that every single term sheet essentially just came in, hundreds of millions, and boom, unicorns minted. Like, can you say any of the companies that you were involved in? And maybe just, if not.
I can talk about my team. So my team was the consumer tech team. Yeah. So there's really some cool companies that our team, we worked on food delivery, DoorDash, PropTech, Compass, Open Door. Travel, I worked on a deal, Get Your Guide, which is this European-based travel company. So it was really cool in that regard, because I got to learn about a bunch of different, very interesting industries. And I would say I definitely wouldn't. I invested in Get Your Guide and ended up learning about travel and experiences and starting Marco. So the definitive reality is I wouldn't have been working on this company without that experience. So for that, I'm excited.
Makes sense.
I love it. The thing that sticks out to me in this interview is the comment you said when talking to your mother, and then you went to go work at SoftBank and you realized, don't let your dreams be just your dreams.
Yeah, she said don't dream. Yeah, well, she said this in college because I guess I was dreaming too much there. But yeah, I think the view there is it has never been a better time to start a project, a company. This is what you're doing, right? Lit and Mark.
It's never been a better time, to launch a meme page and turn into a company.
Yeah, and you guys are crushing it. So I think I don't know that many people of my peers who have taken the plunge. I hope more do, but you can. The option exists, right?
We love it. We love to see it. Well, with that, thank you so much for coming on. This has been amazing and very insightful.
I appreciate it.
That was a great interview with Suman Siva. What do you think, Lit?
Yeah, he's revolutionizing the culture and
He's changing the game.
Changing the game. I love it.
But that got me thinking while we were doing that interview. You know, you as Bain Capital Ventures' newest scout, like you probably get a lot of deals coming by on your desk through your email daily, right? How many would you say you're getting?
Too many. We'll leave it at that.
Too many. Okay, so I want to add a little bit more to that plate. And I want to create a section that we do occasionally with shareholder submitted business ideas that will just rapid fire run by you like it's Shark Tank and see if they're a good idea. Like I've always been thinking a joint strip club car wash would be one. What do you think about that? Good invest or nah?
I would fund that, but probably wouldn't come out of the Bain Scout.
Cash or pass. Cash or pass. That's what we're going to call it. So
cash.
Okay, nice. Yeah, and we'll just do it rapid fire. So to our shareholders, submit your wildest business ideas into the DMs on either the Instagram or Twitter page, and we'll throw them up there and run it by Lit.
Honestly, I mean, this might be a bit of a joke, but like we have VCs who follow this, and I think they might actually reach out being like, holy shit, is someone actually building this? Because I will invest in this right away.
Yeah, we'll make the connection. I mean, I had a guy pay me $200 on Cameo to make an introduction to you. So naturally, I was like, of course. And I responded with a nice custom video and then made the introduction. And we'll be having the call this Friday. So thank you for the $200 that I'll have to pay taxes on, but I appreciate it.
I'll take my cut of that. So
we'll have this discussion off camera. We'll take it offline.
Sounds good.
In mentioning Twitter, you know, one of the things that I wanted to kind of talk about to our shareholders is something that's relatively new to me, the whole world of financial Twitter, FinTwit. And it has become something that I had like 300 Twitter followers until I started working with you. And I didn't really understand.
Where are you at now?
I think I'm at like 3,000 or something.
All right.
Long way to go. But, you know, I have been very surprised by this group of kind of anonymous people who are variously involved in the financial community who have these burner accounts. Like no one has kind of, their face or their name associated with it. But like in real time, they'll be talking about events that are going on at work, all on an anonymized basis. And it is so absolutely hysterical to me. And I just wanted to get your take on it of someone who's like more experienced in this world and to also, you know, raise awareness to this to the shareholders like myself a few months ago who had no idea this existed.
Yeah, FinTwit is a wild west of people just talking shit, and it can vary from people posting like the most obscure, dry humor to thoughtful threads. I'm like, you know, hey, this is why I think I'm going to invest, you know, money into this SaaS company, and they're trading in multiples. They post these charts, and I'm like, all right, you know, I'm more so on the shit posting side. Like, I'm not there to be a think boy.
I'll never provide value on Twitter.
I'll provide some value, but I'd say like 90% of my value is just providing laughs or just fodder for people to just like, you know, troll and talk shit because they're getting trolled. So.
And like, there's the whole like, here's a thread, why, with like a finger pointing down, and there's like the thread emoji, which I didn't know was a thing. I literally thought it was like a hay barrel, and I was like, why are people putting a hay barrel on this thing? And then they're replying with more comments under. I'm like, I can barely read 2 sentences, let alone just, you know, this person's 20 thing thought. But yeah, it's fascinating because it's like, from what I've gathered, a lot of them are like first, second year analysts, kind of just shitting on, you know, their stupid MD, their stupid VP. But it's all in real time. And so it's like, I know about like anonymous people's, you know, like dating lives and all of this shit, that they haven't been getting enough sleep, that they're on this tough deal, that the deal's falling apart. It's the stupidest deal ever. And it's just like, it is so entertaining to me. I love that part of this.
I also see people who deserve to land in horny jail for 10 years. Not going to name names.
Listen, if I see something funny on Twitter, I like it, man. I don't care who sees it. So yeah, you know, sometimes I do get called out on that, and you know what? That is the burden. That is my cross to bear, and I'm all right with that. I'm here to entertain. I'm not here to be a thought boy.
There you go.
One of the other interesting things too is like there's this like group of people who just hate us, and I don't know when they're insulted because like I'm a millennial. I'm used to like being insulted directly to my face. Like, you know, I know it's an insult, and there's sometimes like I'm like I don't know if someone is insulting me or they're complimenting me or what. And it's like it's this whole Gen Z like sense. It's like just, you know, grow up here and insult me directly, or just come to Fiddlesticks on the weekend and just insult me in person, which I would prefer.
Then you'll take a beer glass and just smash it over their heads, and you know, let's square up, right?
Square up, go outside.
But funny enough, yeah, like I mean, the people that square up digitally and you know in the metaverse. One other thing that I love, and you have been a victim of so many times, is the dreaded ratio.
Oh yeah, I get ratioed all the time.
For the people who don't know, a ratio is either when someone posts something so unpopular or just like a bad take, and the amount of quote tweets, retweets, and comments are much higher than the total likes. And that's like a very fascinating phenomenon where it's like, all right, if I see this, I know someone fucked up, and I just go straight to the comments and then see, yep, someone fucked up. The other way is if someone just comments below you and then their likes are way higher than the original post. So two different types of ratios. And I think, Mark, you know, you have experience in both.
Yeah, I mean, I've been getting better at Twitter. Like sometimes I'll just go off on people, and those are usually my most successful tweets that get a lot of followers. I mean, it's just interesting to me being insulted by anonymous people on the internet, because it's like, I don't give a fuck, number one. And number two, like, I mean, some of these kids, like my favorite thing is when we'll find out who they actually are. And it's like, bro, I'll fucking ruin your life right now. And honestly, like I have a few people in mind, and I might just do it for fun because I don't feel bad. Like I feel like anyone who goes on the internet anonymously, like you run the risk of like, you know, getting doxxed, as they say, getting your shit fucked. And I'll happily do that to anyone. But I kind of like being an antagonist on Twitter, insulting people back. I love getting insulted. Like sometimes I'll get new insults that I haven't heard, and like that always makes me laugh. But I mean, it's such an entertaining like phenomena that I just have become recently exposed to, and couldn't be happier for that.
Oh yeah, the recent one I recall that you have been posting everywhere is that golfer with the big vape cloud.
Thing. Yeah. There's like group of anonymous like analysts, I think. They like try to they call it vaping someone when they like post the same picture of this golfer blowing a vape, and I didn't get it. And so then I just took their meme and I started taunting them back. And they're like, "You don't have permission to use this meme." It's like, fuck you, I'll do whatever the fuck I want on the internet, dude. Suck my dick.
It's a fucking meme. Like that's the whole fucking point.
You stole our meme. It's like, bro, go have sex. Wow. Just a bunch of It's great. It's great though, but it's so entertaining. And like, I mean,
it's a fun game, yeah.
I was in like a 2-day war about the vape thing, and it just like, it cracks me up. It's just so entertaining. It's like, you'll be at the gym, just like in between sets, like, all right, let me rip this into Bazart or whatever app I use, and just boom, boom, boom. It's great. I find it very cathartic, if you will.
Ooh, nice word. Nice
you like
word.
That SAT word.
And with that, we will end this episode.
And with that, I will admit that I scored higher on my SAT verbal than I did math, and still became an investment banker. Till next time.
Boom.
This has been Big Swinging Decks by Litquidity with your hosts, Lit and Mark Moran. This is a Red Rock Music podcast and is powered by Acast. Our executive producer is Red Yoakum. Our associate producer is Emma Martins. For more, follow us on Instagram at Litquidity and at It's Mark Moran, or visit the official website, liquidity.co. So tune in weekly to your Managing Director Secretary's favorite podcast, available wherever you listen to podcasts.